Mr. Scheer, always good to have you with us on CTV. Thank you for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Why does the Prime Minister need to resign over this?
Well, he has a broken faith with Canadians. He has said things that we know now are not true, and he's lost the moral authority to govern. When these allegations were first made public, his first reaction was to dismiss them out of hand, and he actually said that at no time did he direct or even put pressure on Ms. Wilson-Raybould to make a different decision, to intervene in an ongoing court case. We now know that to be false. He has continually acted like someone who has something to hide, and at this point in time, it's time for him to go.
Let me ask you about the RCMP as well and their involvement in this letter you've sent to them. Why is it time for the Mounties to get involved?
Well, because the allegations that Ms. Wilson-Raybould raised are very serious. We have to understand that what happened was an independent Crown prosecutor decided that SNC-Lavalin did not qualify for a special deal. Ms. Wilson-Raybould, in her capacity as the Attorney General of Canada, not as a Liberal MP, but as the Attorney General, the highest legal officer in our country, decided that that was an appropriate decision for the Crown prosecutor to make. And at that point in time, based on political considerations, we have quotes now from Gerald Butts, from the Prime Minister himself, talking about elections in Quebec, talking about it doesn't matter how good the policy is, they have to worry about their re-election. So based on those political calculations, they then went to work to try to get her to intervene, to change her decision. That is inappropriate, and we believe certainly it should be the basis for an RCMP investigation.
What do you make of the news that Jerry Butts wants to appear before the Justice Committee himself?
Well, it's like watching a slow-moving train wreck when it comes to the Liberal government. They could have been open and forthcoming right away. Remember, we called for a public inquiry some time ago. At that point in time, they could have allowed the light of day to be shone upon this situation. People like Gerald Butts could have testified, the Prime Minister, the Clerk of the Privy Council, key ministers who have been named now in these allegations. It's only after they get caught that the Liberals start to pretend that they're interested in openness and transparency. So when it comes to who I believe, someone like Justin Trudeau and Gerald Butts, who have been desperately trying to cover this up for weeks now, or Ms. Wilson-Raybould, someone who is willing to stand and speak truth to power, I'll make my decision with Ms. Wilson-Raybould. We'll see what he actually has to say, but as we saw with Michael Wernick, the Clerk of the Privy Council, these individuals have no credibility. They've come and they've tried to smear Ms. Wilson-Raybould's reputation. They've tried to protect themselves, and at the expense of openness and transparency and the integrity of our independent rule of law system.
You heard much of what she had to say over those hours, and I mean, we were all watching and frankly, quite astonished at some of what she had to say, all of those names and those dates and those quotes. What did that say to you?
It said to me that from the get-go, from the very beginning, Ms. Wilson-Raybould obviously could tell that something improper was going on. She spoke with great detail. She took copious notes. She had copies of text messages and emails. So what I took away from that is that she raised these alarms that what Justin Trudeau and Michael Wernick and others in the Prime Minister's office were doing was bordering on illegal, was bordering certainly inappropriate. She said that herself. And I believe that she started to realize that something might happen. And remember, this all culminates in her losing her job. And that, to me, is an important proof point. What the Liberals are saying today in the House of Commons was the fact that a deferred prosecution agreement was never given to SNC-Lavalin is proof that the system worked. But that's ridiculous. Basically, she stood up to them, and they removed her and tried to put someone else in place that would do their bidding. So that argument to me is like someone who is someone who's caught attempting to rob a bank, but the security guard catches them, and so then they turn around to the judge and says, well, hey, we never actually got to rob the bank, so you shouldn't punish us. That's unacceptable. Canadians see right through that excuse.
The Liberal strategy at this point seems to be to talk about jobs, jobs, and jobs. You're familiar with this. The Prime Minister, with many of his surrogates back in Quebec today, talking about the importance of defending jobs. Number one, what do you make of that? And number two, do you worry that could actually help them in the province of Quebec in an election year?
Well, it certainly doesn't hold any water. When you look at the testimony from Jody Wilson-Raybould, she indicates that it was partisan considerations. The quotes that she gave to the committee yesterday include things like there's an election in Quebec, that the Liberal Party had to worry about their own re-election. Justin Trudeau saying that he's an MP for Quebec from Papineau. So if they're worried about jobs, they're only worried about their own. Justin Trudeau was only worried about his own job. But we have to ask ourselves as Canadians, is there a justification for political interference in a court case? We don't want to live in a country where powerful corporations can put pressure on politicians and then they turn around and start making phone calls to Crown prosecutors and attorney generals to let their friends off the hook. That is a dark and dangerous path that we don't want to go down as a country. The damage to our society and indeed our economy, when the message is sent around the world that in Canada, if you're big enough and you're powerful enough, the rules don't apply to you. I don't want to live in that kind of country, and I know that Canadians don't want that to happen either.
We know that the Prime Minister was elected on a feminist agenda, reconciliation with Canada's First Nations. Jody Wilson-Raybould was Canada's first female Indigenous Justice Minister. And now here we are, February 2019. Do you think Canadians, though, are paying close enough attention to this story? It can be convoluted, complicated, as you know, and we are, relatively speaking, still a long way from the next election.
Well, I note that every time the Prime Minister pretends to be something, Canadians see right through that. He's been very fake on this issue, and you know, we saw again today. We saw last week and then the last 3 weeks the smear campaign that Liberals conducted against Miss Wilson-Raybould. You know, a sexist campaign trying to impugn her character and saying that she was difficult to work with and trying to undermine her credibility. Just today, a Liberal member of Parliament from British Columbia accused her of just acting on sour grapes and that she couldn't handle the stress. And this Liberal MP went on to say that it was likely Miss Wilson-Raybould's father pulling her strings. That is just completely unacceptable, and Justin Trudeau has yet to denounce those remarks. So I think Canadians see through his phoniness on this. When he doesn't like what a strong woman in his caucus says to him, he fires her and puts in someone, puts in a minister that will bend to his will. Canadians see that for what it is, and I believe that they will remember that.
Interesting times for our country. Mr. Scheer, thank you for taking some time out of your busy day to come on CTV, as always.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.